the code so much easier again. At the same time, it has these benefits which, rather than complicating the infrastructure, it also makes the infrastructure easier. And this is why I see it fitting into the future of tech landscapes. People are going to have a double benefit in adopting Rust, especially for larger tech companies. How has Rust influenced your career growth, and what opportunities has it opened up for you? So like I mentioned, Shuttle eventually became one of my clients, and that meant that I've been the tech lead of Shuttle until earlier this year. That's a big opportunity that it opened up for me, but the sad opportunities connected to this is, well, I got to travel a bit. I lived in London for a while I worked on Shuttle and helped them out with their project. And then other things that happened is I attended Hero Rust, then eventually became a speaker earlier this year at Rust Nation, was a moderator at RustConf a few months ago as well. Just things that never happened for me in the past in terms of opportunities or career growth that open up. Being connected with communities. That's something that happened a lot for me. And then another thing that happened is just stuff almost like this interview. I spoke at Eurorust. After speaking at Eurorust, I ended up delivering a Rust workshop for the software craftsmanship community inside of London, helping them to onboard onto Rust, doing stuff like this, just stuff that happened within my career that's very new to me, which is in terms of being more of a public face for something. Are there any skills or lessons you've learned with Rust that stand out? Well, I wouldn't say I've learned a skill uniquely because of Rust. There's more a skill that I learned uniquely because of Rust and my own background. To explain this, so looking back at my GitHub repo, one would find that I've had or made tools for developers all the way back to 2013. I believe that's when I wrote my first jQuery plugin. However, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, maybe even all the way to 2019, having been involved in the open source space, I never connected with a community. I just helped out of some open source projects, had my own, but there was never a connection. It's only once I got into Rust that I had this new thing where I connected with people, and just, it's almost for me like a new skill. Just learning to connect with others, learning from their experiences, learning from them. An example of this would be I'm currently trying to figure out how dependency injection would work in Rust. In the past, I would just try to figure something like this out. This time around, I went to places like the Rust forums and asked people. There's this very specific thing in the language that I don't currently understand, and I was able to get a very technical answer on how this is supposed to work, or what the language, Rust as a language, is trying to do. For me, the point here being, the lesson that I learned is just connecting with a community. And the lessons that it opened up for me is, now that I'm here, back in South Africa, I'm missing that connection. And I'm working now with a few guys to see how we can start our own Rust meetups here in South Africa. And that's a new skill that I'm now also working on, just because of Rust. What advice would you give to developers or students in Africa or your region who are new to Rust or considering learning it? My advice would be to just do it. Go out there, learn the language. One big thing with just learning the language, which connects to my previous point and even my earlier points. you're probably going to find this very hard. So connect, well, not very hard, but just doing it on your own is going to be hard. It's going to be a lot easier to connect with a community, whether that be an online community or finding a very local community. My advice, find something local if you can. If you can't, fall back to an online community that can help you just on your learning journey. It's going to make it so much easier being connected into a community. Follow up. Are there resources or communities that you would recommend? Yes. I can't really recommend communities except if you're living in London, go to Rust London. They are absolutely amazing. Other communities within Africa, I know there's a community in Nigeria that you can also check out. Then in terms of resources, I might be biased, but Shuttle has had in 2023 something called the Christmas Code Hunt. That's a great resource, in my opinion, for anyone who wants to get hands-on experience with back-end development inside of Rust. Then online, one would also find stuff like Luca Palmieri's 100 Rust exercises. Those are also amazing. In my view, anything that's hands-on like the Christmas Code Hunt or Luca's 100 exercises, they would be the best approach for learning Rust, or the best resources. Another thing is coming back to communities. See if there are hackathons happening within your community. Attend those hackathons. They're going to help you greatly. Interacting with other developers. Coming there with a problem you're facing, sharing it with them, and just having them help you out. Push through it, your problem. If you can't find something local, again, find something online. Hackathons are another great resource to look out for. What is one common misconception about Rust that you often hear, and how do you usually address it? So currently the most common misconception is probably Rust is a hard language to learn. The way I address it is to say that I actually don't think Rust is a hard language to learn. Instead, what I think is that the Rust paradigm is new to people, and that's what they are actually finding hard to learn. So let me explain this. We all had, for our very first language that we learned, we all had a very hard journey understanding that. That requires quite a lot of changing in how we think about things. For me, my first language was C++. That was hard. Then I might have moved to another language, C++ being a memory management language. My second language was again memory management. That would have been very easy. However, my second language was something like Python, object-oriented. That again was hard because it was a lot different from C++. The paradigm from memory management to a garbage collector is different again. At the time, Python wasn't really object-oriented as well. That's another paradigm difference between it and C++. So that meant that was hard again. But then after PHP, staying within languages, for me, languages like JavaScript and Python, which are dynamic, object-oriented, dynamic and garbage collector, doing those switches are easy. So I think people are missing the thing of what is actually hard when they are switching to a new language. They might find, oh, a language is easy, but they don't realize they are switching to a language which has the same concepts as the languages they've known before. Like in my example, JavaScript and Python having garbage collection, exactly like PHP did, made it easy to switch to them. They didn't really have object orientation like C++. Again, I found stuff in JavaScript hard because it uses prototyping. A new method. My point being again, it's not the switching of the languages that people have historically found easy after they've learned their first language. It's switching within the same language that people have found easy. As soon as they then switch to a new language with a new paradigm, like Rust, that's when things feel hard again, because they have to learn a new paradigm and the language at the same time. So I'm of the opinion that Rust as itself is not hard. What people are finding hard is learning ownership. The ownership model that Rust has. Learning that for the first time is what people actually find hard. The thing that I point people to mostly as part of how I address this issue is Lars's presentation that he had at Rust Nation earlier this year. They had some studies inside of Google seeing what the productivity is like for people who are picking up Rust and finding that, okay, people who pick up Rust, 60% of them, I believe that was the number, 60% of them were able to pick up Rust within 2 months. And if I have this correct, this was on par or faster than picking up any other new language at the same, or a new language for a project for the developers they tested or benchmark. So in terms of that, Rust isn't. We have evidence to show that Rust isn't hard as a language, and I also think that Rust as a language isn't really hard for people. It's the new paradigm that they are struggling with. Follow up. How would you encourage developers to overcome any initial hurdles with Rust? So again, for me, this is get connected with a local or online community. That's just going to make your entire Rust journey so much easier and so much more enjoyable. What role do you see Rust playing in the African tech landscape over the next few years? So in my mind, the journey Africa has ahead of itself is very unique from what other countries has had to get to the points where they are. An example of this would be South Africa, where I live. We had, in terms of our internet adoption, what we had was telephone lines, and then, well, let's first do another country like America. They had the entire pipeline. They had telephone lines for internet, then they eventually had cable, then they eventually had stuff like faster cable, fiber and mobile. In South Africa we had telephone lines. Then we completely skipped cable and we jumped directly to fiber and mobile for internet. The point here being that if South Africa were to follow the exact same steps that a country like America did, if we had cable as well in there, we would have had such a longer adoption to internet, and we would have been so far behind technically by skipping steps, by directly jumping to the best thing for our era at the time being mobile. That gave us a competitive, I wouldn't say advantage, but equal ground with other countries. I see Africa as a whole is going to have the same thing with its future. As it is adopting new technologies, it is going to have to skip steps that other countries has had in the past and directly move to the greatest, latest thing. The biggest maybe example, modern example, is like just switching to solar maybe directly, whereas other countries has had a lot of power stations in between. In terms of languages or programming, this might mean, in my mind at least, skipping stuff like the historical languages that other countries went through. I currently see a lot of people still inside of Africa holding on to Java and C#. I don't see that playing to their advantage. Skipping directly to Rust, I think, would be way more beneficial to those companies, those regions, and eventually those countries. And that's why I think Rust has a unique part to play. Are there any particular industries or types of projects you think will benefit most? So, first off, let me say that I don't think everything needs to be written in Rust. I'm very much still of the opinion that if you're going to have a very prototype-like project where you're trying to figure things out, maybe Python or JavaScript or some other scripting language might